How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Because in theory,
Correct.
I look at it and I check. How can I do that?
Right? Pretty good.
When I get the last one. Now, this is.
Hey, Chris. Hi, John. How are you? Good to see you. I know. Couple weeks ago.
My mother-in-law.
Yeah, sorry to hear about
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
Very good. Yeah.
Better than no hair.
True.
Oh, you ready?
How are you?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I saw her.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
one of them.
Bill, I was very lucky on Monday. I came back from the Cape on Monday. And I came through that section and it flooded on 95 about 15 minutes before. Yeah, about 15 minutes before.
That is a little, over high in areas.
It had just started to rain a little bit. Down, might have been half an hour before, but it was not that long before. I was sitting in that mess over an hour. It used to be low, they make it lower, these are the height of the trucks to get under those bridges.
Right, and they don't want to raise the bridge. But then again, they do the same thing at Newport. They do the self-made. Where they do part of the city that they do in the swamp. Because space and stuff is good. So then you have no runoff. You can actually now instead of putting it before here, now it's like you
See, they're ripping down the wall, they put up a lot of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
We tore the wall and brick it. We pulled the whole thing down. Hey, big green one.
Sorry.
Yep. How are you, Bill? Good. Good, good.
Hello?
Good.
It's fully designed.
Okay.
Have a car hit it. Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to change that for you as I go to see the acting chair on my way. How's that? Does that make sense?
Is it in there?
Not a shark, it's a stick.
I'd like to call to order a meeting of the Toronto State Board of Elections on Wednesday, September 7th. It is 2:01 p.m. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Chairwoman Maderas, Vice Chairman Pierce,
Here.
Member Betancourt,
Here.
Member DeSimone,
Present.
Member Johnson,
Present.
Member Scholes, Member West,
Present.
Executive Director Robert Reposa,
Present.
Legal Counsel Raymond Parcho.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you, but
The quorum being present, we can proceed with the agenda. Item 1 on the agenda, the board may discuss and vote to approve the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, August 16, 2022. Is there a
Motion to approve. Second.
moved and seconded? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I will abstain because I was not at that meeting. Item number 2, the board may discuss and vote to approve the minutes of the meeting held on Wednesday, August 24, 2022. Moved in, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous, and it passes. Item 3, the board may discuss and vote upon a matter relating to the express vote marking devices and this display of candidate names in Spanish for the statewide primary on September 13, 2022 in the cities of Central Falls, Pawtucket, Providence, and Woonsocket. Mr. Reposa?
Good afternoon, members of the board. I would like to start this item by just letting you know, but you already know, that this equipment that we are going to discuss is brand new to the state of Rhode Island. It was actually received at the Board of Elections middle of July. It was unpackaged, set up, tested, and sent out to the 39 boards of canvassers to be used for early voting. On August 24th, early voting began in all 39 communities. On Tuesday, August 30th, almost a week after the early voting began, at 3:26 p.m., Kathy Placencia from the Providence Board of Canvassers called BOE staff member Steve Taylor, our special projects coordinator, to report that her poll workers and a voter at the early voting site located at the Dorley Building in Providence claimed that they saw a Lorzer's name on the ballot while using the express vote. Again, the express vote replaced the automark. The automark was used statewide since 2006. Steve was told that they ejected the ballot and they reinserted the ballot at the polling place, and the correct names were displayed on the screen. They voided the express vote ballot, and the voter voted using a regular ballot into the DS-200. Since they were not able to replicate the problem, it is difficult to troubleshoot something that could not be verified. Steve instructed them to shut down that express vote unit and to only use the other express vote unit that was in use at this location and to monitor the situation. At that time, Steve notified Miguel and myself of the incident. At 4:42 p.m., Steve texted Joe Vitale from ES&S, our project manager, and explained what he had been told, and was informed by Joe that he didn't know how that was even possible. On Wednesday, August 31st, at 9:41 a.m., Kathy Placencia, again from the Providence Board of Canvassers, was here at this facility to pick up supplies for her to use it for early voting, and she and Steve discussed the incident from the day before. She informed Steve that she had talked to her poll workers about the incident again, and they were adamant that they saw Alorza's name on the express vote ballot. Immediately after that discussion, Steve went to see Joe Vitale in his office and explained to him what Kathy had said. At 10:30 a.m., while in Joe's office, Steve was told by Joe that he discovered there was an error in the file for the Spanish version of the Providence mayoral Democratic contest. Steve and Joe immediately came into my office and they told me what had happened. At 10:56 a.m., Steve spoke to Kathy in Providence to notify her of what was discovered. At that time, she also told Steve the other express vote machine had frozen and was not working. Steve instructed her to let the poll workers know not to let anyone use the express vote and that a technician would be arriving shortly to repair the situation. Joe Vitale did a review of the files and discovered other issues in other races, which he corrected. Joe, along with Board of Election staff member Jacob Ganser, went to the Dorley Center to replace the US drive in both of the express votes that were in use. It was later determined that beside the Democratic mayoral race in Providence that contained an error, the error was also noted in the race for lieutenant governor on the Democratic ballot. And on the Republican ballot, there were two races with an error: the congressional race in which Alan Waters is an unopposed candidate, and the general treasurer in the race in which James Lathrop is running, also unopposed for this primary. All four communities that received Spanish ballots were affected. The communities consisted of Central Falls, Pawtucket, Providence, and Woonsocket. With the BOE employees assistant, ES&S, all of the communities affected had their USB drives in the express vote corrected and replaced by the close of business on August 31st. On Tuesday, September 6th, it was brought to our attention that one of the candidates for mayor on the Democratic Spanish ballot on the express vote was spelled incorrectly. Joe Vitale and a member of the Board of Election staff went to the Dorley Center and replaced the sticks that were in use with the corrected stick. At the request of the Board of Election staff, on Tuesday afternoon, September 6th, representatives from the Secretary of State's election division proofed the Spanish ballots contained within the express votes to confirm what was displayed was accurate. It was determined that 3 races in total had heading issues. Candidates' names were listed correctly. The errors were on the Woonsocket ballot for Democratic for Rep 50, was not printed on the ballot, and also in Woonsocket, there was a race for the Democratic State Committee where the Democratic State Committee was displayed in English rather than Spanish. In Providence, the Democratic State Committee was printed again in English instead of Spanish. It was this morning, the staff from the Secretary of State's office was present here at 2000 Plainfield Pike to approve the ballot changes in the express vote at which time election system and software began creating new USB drives, and they are installed in the early voting express votes in Woonsocket and Providence at this time. And we will continue to install these corrected USBs in all express votes that will be used on primary day in these two communities. As a matter of record, 55 votes were cast into the DS-200s in Central Falls, Pawtucket, Providence, and Woonsocket. When the initial sticks where the names were wrong on it, names were wrong on the express vote, we were able to receive that number from the DS-200s, from the public counter. It would tell us how many express vote ballots had been accepted in the tabulator. The breakdown of the four communities. At that time, on August 31st, the DS-200 in Central Falls showed 97 ballots had been cast, of which 2 were ballots that were created from the express vote. In Pawtucket, 393 ballots were cast into the DS-200, in which 26 were created from the express vote. Providence, 953 ballots were cast into the DS-200, of which 26 were created from the express vote. And finally, in Providence, at that time, 106 voters had voted early. Oh, I'm sorry, in Woonsocket. 106 voters had cast ballots into the DS-200, in which 1 voter had used the express vote. As of this presentation, express vote ballots have been voided in Providence only, in which there have been 6 ballots voided since the beginning of early voting on August 24th. We had no confirmation from any of the other 3 communities that they have any voids. And at this time, with your permission, I would like to ask Election System and Software to come up and explain to you their knowledge of what has happened during this time.
Please. Good afternoon. Would you give your name, please?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if Mr. Vitale is going to give testimony. If he is, he should be under oath.
Mr. Vitale, would you please stand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before the State Board of Elections is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak this afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joe Vitale. I am the Senior Account Manager for Election Systems and Software, and for the past 20 years, I have been the Account Manager for the state of Rhode Island. I also have with me today Matthew Ozempa, who is also an ES&S representative and is assisting me with all election duties. We are here today to share the facts about our equipment and to speak about the error which happened during early voting. As Mr. Raposa stated, on August 31st, ES&S was notified of incorrect names appearing in 4 races, the Spanish language version of the ballot on the ballot marking device. This error affected ballot marking devices being used in the 4 jurisdictions, as mentioned. The error stemmed from preparation of the election database for early voting and occurred during a new process we are using for the first time. As Bob mentioned, this was the first time we are actually using this machine. In preparing the ballot marking devices, ES&S or myself created a template based on the 2018 election because of the similarity of races in the 4 years. The ballot information for each district was entered correctly in English. However, we failed to update some of the Spanish names for the selection where a voter would vote in Spanish. Instead, some of those names did appear from the 2018 election. Once discovered and identified, the error was corrected by me performing a manual update to the database, burning new USD sticks, and again, as Bob mentioned, along with a board member, we immediately went out to the early voting sites and replaced those USD sticks. Subsequently, on September 6th, we were notified that one of the names for mayoral candidate was misspelled. Again, the update was made. We immediately burned new sticks and were over at Providence immediately. When these circumstances arise, we do everything possible to work transparently and openly to ensure that voters have a positive voting experience and that the election results are reported accurately. ES&S takes full responsibility for this error and apologizes to the Secretary of State's office, the Board of Elections, affected candidates, and voters in the state of Rhode Island. Going forward, we had put procedures in place to ensure that this will never happen again. One of the recommendations that Bob Proposa had suggested, and we fully support, and I can show you later because Bob asked me to do a demonstration. When the person is testing the machine, they're actually putting in a blank card. They have no idea what's supposed to be on the ballot, candidates, contests. His suggestion was that for every ballot marking device, we would actually have a printed ballot in front of it. So when the voter is voting, they can compare what's on the actual ballot to what's on the screen. And hindsight is 2020. If we had done that this past time, hopefully the tester would have caught the error. But that is something that we definitely plan on going forward. So if you'd like, do you want me to do the demo or do you have any questions or?
Would you like to see a demo?
Shall we do the demo first and then questions? Any preference?
That's up to the chair.
Why don't we see the demo? I
Okay.
think that would be helpful for everybody.
So as I mentioned, we insert a blank card. This is the actual ballot. So without the tester or anyone seeing this, they would have no idea what is going on the screen. And they're actually told to vote a certain sequence because once the card is printed, that card actually is inserted into the tabulator. So they're really looking to make sure that the touch screen works, that they're voting properly, and they're not looking at the candidates. But that's something that we want to change. So by having this ballot in front of them, they can actually see the first race and they can see what's supposed to be there. And they can vote accordingly and go through the ballot, compare the race on the ballot to what's on the screen, vote accordingly. Show the summary screen. Then when they print the card, they can actually verify again that the selections they made are correct. Because this is what they get. This is what comes out of the machine. So then this is then inserted into the DST window. Oh.
Thank you. Anything more?
No, that's,
Questions from the board?
Okay, Mr. Vitale, so just so I understand it,
what comes out of the machine in the test is only the candidates that were voted. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's just, if for example, and I don't want to use any of the local candidates' names, but if, for example, this were a presidential election and President Biden's name was one of the candidates. If I didn't vote for President Biden, I wouldn't see President Biden, correct?
On the printout,
Correct.
correct.
Okay. So to have someone with the actual ballot would assist them in reviewing the ballot. But when you say the tester will have the ballot, who is that tester?
Well, we bring in people to test the machines.
Okay, but this is done under the auspices of ES&S.
This is,
Your company.
and the Board of Elec, in conjunction with the Board of Elections.
So is there a representative from the Board of Elections there when you do this?
In most cases, yes, Steve Taylor is out there or someone else.
Is there a representative from the Secretary of State's office there as well?
No,
And the reason I ask that is because I know they're charged with the ballot preparation. So one of the suggestions that I'm going to have to the board as a commissioner is that when these tests are done, I think there should be a protocol established that includes someone from our office, because we're responsible for testing. But there should also be someone responsible from Secretary of State's office because they review the ballot. And certainly if I were that elected official, I'd want somebody from my department there as well. But that would be just a suggestion. I think it's a good suggestion what's happening, but to just trust this to a vendor, I think is not proper on either our part or on the Secretary of State's part. And I don't want to speak for them, but I would certainly suggest that going forward, we establish some kind of a protocol. And obviously, Bob can help us with that, but I think there should be some kind of protocol set up so that every one of these machines get tested. They get tested with a ballot. I know the issues seemed to be related to the Spanish ballot, but we didn't get any complaints with regard to the English ballot. So we don't know, because the test, I'm assuming, on the English ballot was
well,
conducted the same way.
because the way the software is set up, the English is what is actually on the ballot. So that is all proofed by the Secretary of State. The Spanish is a different field, and some of that has to be entered manually. And that is where the error occurred, because that is a manual entry as opposed to, as I said, what is on the ballot is in English. And that we know is correct because the Secretary of State proofs those ballots.
So-
But again, this is a brand new process.
No, I understand. Understand.
With the automark, they actually put a ballot in the automark.
Right. And the only other thing I'll say, and this is not directed to ES&S, but and I'll actually maybe direct this to Bob. The statute regarding ballot submission and testing, where it charges us with the testing, that's a statute that has been in effect for some time, correct?
That is correct.
So the testing that's references testing of a machine that receives a ballot, correct?
That is correct.
Not a machine that creates a ballot.
That is correct.
And this is the only machine that you've begun to work with that creates a ballot, correct?
That is correct.
So I also think that maybe come January, we put something in our legislation to address the express vote particularly, rather than have this idea of simply testing for counting of ballots, because that's really, the only thing you test on the old machine is how the ballots are counted. And on this machine, there's an additional step because it's creating a ballot.
But it does not count.
But
It does not.
it does not count. The tally is on something separate.
That is correct. But it
So-
doesn't create the ballot.
So the law that's in existence doesn't really address this particular machine or this ballot creation, if you will.
The machine that is not specific in Title 17.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other members of the board have
Yes.
questions? And I would like to ask that you direct your questions to Mr. Vitale or Mr. Reposa, and let's hold our comments with respect to suggested changes until after we've had a chance to hear from any members of the public. Questions, Mr. Vitale?
I think Mr. West.
Oh, excuse me.
I think you're.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, thank you.
That's all right.
When you receive the information from the Secretary of State's office, is that on a stick? Is it in a file? How do you receive it?
Usually it's, we receive a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet.
It's on a spreadsheet. So what you receive then would be the final, the ballot that is going to be
Or the
mailed out to
contest.
the public, but you received the ballot. But do you receive
Well-
it in Spanish also?
We have, well, the headings, the titles, contest titles, are in Spanish because they're on the ballot.
So-
But the names are not Spanish.
No, they're in English, I guess. But when the printed paper comes out of the machine, it comes out, does it come out in Spanish
This
or
pa-
does it comes out in, does
No,
it come out?
this paper?
It comes out, yeah,
It-
paper
Yes,
there.
it comes out in English,
It
and
comes
that's,
out so someone who does not understand English looks at that.
well, they
and-
can reinsert it into the machine and they can read the summary and it will be in
But if-
Spanish.
But if they're looking at that paper coming out of the machine and they do the Spanish input, but it comes out in English, they really have no idea, right? They can't say that so-and-so is running for president, so-and-so is running for vice president. When they get that piece of paper and say, that's who I voted for.
Well, there are two reasons for that. Well, number one, they could reinsert the ballot into the machine and in Spanish, they can review their choices.
Do
But,
they know this?
well, again, this is a whole brand new process.
Okay.
But the main reason it's in English is privacy. If one person voted in Spanish and this came out in Spanish, you would know how they voted. Nowhere in the election logs or on the ballot does it ever say what language was picked. And again, that is a privacy issue. So if one person voted in Spanish and you see this ballot's in Spanish, you're going to know how they voted.
And
that-
you've had
that's-
50 people that voted.
Well, I
in
mean, but that's
Spanish,
the way the software is set up.
It still kind of creates a problem though, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, if the law says that we have to have the ballot in Spanish for those who are Spanish speaking, but yet that information that comes out to them if they use this machine, comes out to them and it's not in Spanish, then you're not really, or we're not basically following the law, are we?
Chairman, I think the Commissioner West's point is extremely well taken. So you're saying it's a privacy issue, correct? So could that issue be corrected by having English and Spanish on each of the ballots so for example, I'm looking at governor's race, right? And I'm not fluent in Spanish, so I can't tell you what it should say. But if it simply said governor and the Spanish word for governor.
Well, it does on the ballot.
on
It does on the
this-
printed-
On this printout that I'm looking.
No,
at.
it does on the printed ballot, but not on,
Right, but on this printed slip that comes out, let's say that you had a Spanish ballot in Providence and in Central Falls, you had a Thai ballot. Let's just use that as an example. So then my ballot in Providence would have the Spanish word for governor, the English word for governor. That way, you wouldn't know who voted which way. The same thing in Central Falls if you're using the Thai language or in any other city or town. So I don't know, how difficult, I guess, is it to,
Well,
that.
I mean, we have a certified software here, and that cannot be changed now.
no, I understand that. I'm talking about going forward.
Well, you know,
I think-
it's
I think Commissioner
definitely
West's- I think Commissioner West's point is extremely important.
I think it's
Because-
a valid point. Yes, I agree.
Because to say it's just a privacy issue, so they all come out in English, well, then if they came out in both, then I think you avoid that privacy issue. But I think Commissioners has a.
I agree. It's something that
Because that's a
I'll
huge
definitely look
issue.
into.
Any other comments from commissioners?
Mr. Vitale, it's my understanding that that machine is in lieu, that machine is in lieu of a printed ballot, is that correct? It's just a
Yes,
printer,
yes,
okay? It's not a vote, it's not a tabulator.
right.
The machine, the slip has to be physically moved into the DS-200.
Correct.
To be tabulated. There is a summary screen on that machine, is that not correct?
Yes, you're correct.
So after the voter completes the selections, whether it's in English or Spanish or some other language, there is the summary screen that will pop up all the races,
Correct.
and the person can double check to make the corrections on that, whether or not they wanted to vote for somebody they didn't vote for or change the vote. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Right. Then after they're satisfied with that, excuse me, so the other thing on the machine, it will, on the first screen, there's a list of ballot, on the ballot, the offices in sequence. In other words, it starts at the top with governor, right down to lieutenant governor.
Correct. They'd be
Okay.
the same order as the printed ballot.
Okay, so if somebody voted, who's not an English speaker, and voted for governor, when the ballot comes out, printed out, they can look at the position on the ballot compared to the position that's on the machine, see who they voted for. Is that right?
Yes,
Right. Okay, so they could double check that. Also, when the ballot comes out, they actually physically look at that ballot. And if they have a problem with that ballot, don't they have a right to go to one of the people at the voting station to say, I made a mistake, or I want to void this ballot and put in a new ballot? They have that
That's-
option,
yeah,
don't they?
that's correct.
And those ballots would then be voided, correct? Right? And then the correct ballot would have been put into the machine. Okay? When you say there is nothing in the logs to determine that the ballot is printed in Spanish, okay? When you say when the machine is opened up afterwards, there is no
In the case, when I retrieved the sticks from Providence, Central Falls, Pawtucket, Woonsocket, the stick itself keeps a log of all the activity in that machine from the first time I opened the machine to the end. You can look at that log and it'll tell you what time the machine opened, a ballot was put in, a ballot was marked, a ballot was ejected. But in nowhere in the log does it say Spanish language was chosen, English was chosen. And that's why we couldn't, out of the 55 ballots, we could not determine how many were actually voted in Spanish.
Right. One of our concerns was when we first asked the machines to be purchased, was that people from the disability community, if they were the only ones voting on that machine, somebody would say, well, we know who
Right.
voted because that person's disabled and needed the use of that machine. So we've been encouraging people to actually use the
Correct,
machine
and they are using it.
so that the vote will be interspersed
Correct.
with everybody else, and there will be no way to determine who voted for whom. And this is not the reason you indicated that you wanted these non-English speaking voters to use that machine, and so it's printed up only in English, so no one will know that a Spanish speaker who is not conversant in English voted. So that person could not be targeted.
Correct,
Is that right?
correct.
Privacy? Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Johnson?
Mr. Vitale, once the files were uploaded into the Express Vote, the definition files, did anyone proof the screens, review the screens of the machines?
Last night, yes, Secretary of State's office.
Before, I mean,
Oh.
before they went,
No, I'm sorry, no.
okay. So neither this was the first time that we reviewed them. So
Well,
the
it-
test that you just performed there, that you went through, was not done
No,
initially.
but again, the English is coming right from the printed ballot. so
No,
the-
I understand.
The English,
No, I mean, in this, for this, so not in English or
Correct,
Spanish. Okay. And then with the regards to the printout in English, do the machines have, and forgive me if you already answered this, the capability, if someone votes in Spanish, for it to come out in Spanish?
no, not at this version of software.
So they don't even have, you can't even program it that way as these machines
No.
stand. Okay, I think that's it for now.
Ms. Bettencourt?
Yeah. My question is actually to Bob. You mentioned, just for clarification, you mentioned out of all the 55 express ballots, that only 6 in Providence had been voided. Is that correct?
6 had been voided.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that when they were voided, that the voter did not take another one and start over. It just means that 6 cards had been voided
Mhm.
since early voting started.
Okay. Out of those, so out of those 26, 6 were voted.
No. Of
Just
that
in
20,
general.
of the 26 were voted into the DS-200 because that's how we obtained the number 26 was from the actual voting machine.
Mhm.
The 6 voids were, if you were looking at an inventory of 32 cards at that time, 26 had been put into the DS-200, 6 had been voided with the poll worker.
Okay. Thank you.
Before we go to the public, any other questions?
I have-
Just questions. Let's delay comments, so.
No, I have another, I have a question
Yes.
I'd like
I
to,
have one more
Mr.
too.
Vitale, and I think possibly Mr. Proposer too. On this process, going from the Secretary of State's office to where the final file is written that you put on sticks. Initially, the ballot will come from the Secretary of State's office. The final ballot will come to you on a file? Is that correct?
No, I give them the final ballot.
No, oh, no.
I give them a,
They determine what the ballot's gonna be,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Who's gonna win on the ballot?
correct.
All right. Then it comes to the Board of Elections or to you.
You mean the printed ballot or?
Are you talking about the file, meaning the programming, the USB? The
Yeah,
raw,
what I wanna
raw
know is
data before
that
it's hard
information-
copy? A raw data before there's a paper copy?
How he gets his information to put on the stick.
It's one piece of software that does the entire process, from the database to the ballot, to the programming, to the results. It's all one program. So that file exists, and that file exists for this primary, say, and then there'll be another file that'll exist for the general election. But it's one file, and
Okay, but that comes from the Secretary of State's office?
well, that's where we generate, it begins with
Okay.
the names and the contests.
Right, and placed on the ballot, where the spot on the ballot that these names are gonna be
Yes.
placed, correct?
Correct.
Then it comes to you. It's verified from the Secretary of State's office
Yes,
that these are the correct names and positions of
correct. Yep.
people on the ballot. All right. So then it comes to you, you write a program, or you insert
Well,
this,
Yeah, it's
So-
part of this, yes, and
Alright.
it's part of the software.
from the Secretary of State's office they say that this is the final ballot that we are going to receive. Then it comes to you. You write the program, you insert it in the program. All right. Do you verify when you finish this program that the information you receive from the Secretary of State's office is the same information that you have on the file?
Well, we verify that through LNA testing. Because if the file was different from the ballot, then either the DS-200 would reject the ballot, or when we got the results, we would see the discrepancy. So in that case, like I said, it's one piece of software that carries all the way through. Now, this is different.
But by inputting the wrong information on it, it wasn't caught, was it?
No, this is a different animal, because now
But this is what I'm talking about.
well, you're talking about the ballot. I'm
Yeah,
thinking you're
but
talking about the
you're putting
printed ballot.
information- You're putting the information from the ballot onto a stick that goes into this machine.
Yeah, but what I'm telling you is the Spanish is a different field, and that information does not come over from the English. That has to be entered manually.
You have someone who speaks Spanish that.
No, it's the names. They're English. The names are in English. They just don't come over into that Spanish field.
Oh, I understand that. I understand, but the Spanish part has to be inputted by someone who understands Spanish or.
Well, the Spanish
or the-
contests, the
The machine
Spanish
does it.
contests are there because they go on the ballot. It's the names, the field for the Spanish names, which are English names, is blank and has to be entered manually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
but
sorry.
what I want to get at is this. The verification of the process that's being done. Do you verify the process at the end? Your work, you verify it.
Well, we missed it in this case.
Okay. And the Secretary of State's office verifies their work?
The English, yes.
I mean, okay. All right. It's not the answer I'm looking for, but
I'm not sure where you're going, but I'm trying to explain to you how the software works.
all right. But
Commissioner Johnson?
when it comes out, what we need to have is verification of another language, that the language that what's been inputted
Let's get to that later.
is
That's,
certified.
okay.
All right.
thank you. Yeah, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the Secretary of State's office does verify the Spanish ballots too, the printed ballots.
Yes, but
Okay.
again, the names are not in Spanish.
Correct. So Bob, maybe this is a question for you, and I'll just preface it by referencing the Common Cause ACLU letter about the 55 that were impacted. I guess I share the concern that I'm sure we all have, that we need to make every effort to try to ensure that those 55 affected voters have their votes counted as they were intended. So I guess my question is, one, have we had, since this has, this issue has been circulating, have we had anyone else come forward to say they might have been impacted and how to rectify it? And then I have a follow-up to
We
that.
have not.
Okay.
And I just want to, for the record, state the 55 votes that have been brought to your attention in these 4 communities are votes that have counted. They were received by our tabulator. The voter placed their express vote ballot that
Right.
Joe showed you into a DS-200 and it was counted.
Yes, and thank you. This is why, as they intended it. So if, as Mr. Vitale said, the template from 2018, there was a name, so Jorge Alorza's name was pulled. If someone voted for Jorge Alorza on the screen and it printed out, they didn't see Jorge Alorza on the paper. So I guess that's so that person might they voted for someone that wasn't in the race. So I guess I'm wondering, do we have a way to put something out there in, in the media, what have you, that is looking to solve this issue? Because I do think we need to move forward with solutions eventually, but do we have the capability, knowing, I mean, we potentially can't get to all 55 voters, but I'm just trying, and maybe that's not possible. I'm trying to see how we can, between now
Mhm.
and then,
Now,
rectify the situation.
I would like to bring to your attention that the 55 express vote ballots that were printed from the express vote, tabulated by the DS-200, there is no guarantee they were all in Spanish, because that machine also does English. And we have, again, have no way of knowing who did which language. But the voter, and I can tell you the process, Joe can confirm what I'm going to ask, but when the voter is done marking their ballot, they take it out of the express vote. They have the option to put it back into the express vote, and it comes up on the screen and confirms to the voter who they have voted for, which is contained on their card, which is their express vote ballot. It's also printed on the card, and the voter has that card in front of them to look at, to see that they can look to see, yes, I voted for this person for governor. I voted for this person for lieutenant governor. They have that card in front of them before they place it into the DS-200. My question to Joe is there anything on the screen that would tell the voter to check their ballot before they removed it? Or is there a message that they can put it back in so they can review it?
I do not believe there's any message, either of those messages.
I think there should be, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, may I ask a question to Mr. Vitale and or Bob? So voters who are sight impaired and you use kind of like the audio part to vote, right? Have we checked that if they use it in Spanish or in English, the names are correct?
Yes,
Great, and they are
yes,
in the 4 municipalities?
yes, yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to offer anyone from the public who wishes to make comments on this situation or has any questions, but I would ask that you be as concise as possible in this process. If you wish, would you please come forward and identify yourself? Mr. Marion? Do we need to swear him?
I do not believe Mr. Marin is giving testimony. He's just going to give comments from the public.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, John
A
Marion.
little closer, John,
Oh,
bring it closer to you.
Sorry, that good?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm John Marion from Common Cause, Rhode Island. My only question is, so my understanding is that the DS-200 is when it's reading the barcode. It's not reading the names. So my question is the barcode an accurate representation now of the voter selections?
The barcode is reading the position, not the name. And if it wasn't accurate, the DS-200 would reject the card.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Anything else, John? Thank you, John. Anyone else from the public? Please come forward and state your name.
Thank you, Stephen Brown.
Push it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Stephen Brown from the ACLU of Rhode Island. We sent a letter earlier this morning about the issue about the printed ballots themselves that come out of the machine, and they're then fed back into the machine. And we are concerned that following up on the commentary that occurred earlier, we are concerned that it is a violation of the Voting Rights Act not to have that ballot in Spanish. Now, if there is some sort of software issue, then the solution has to be having it in both English and Spanish, if it can't be programmed just to do the Spanish. But we are very concerned to hear that there appears to be no effort to try to address that issue, and we hope that the board will demand that, at least in time for the November election, it is addressed. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Can I ask?
Any questions? Yeah.
Sorry,
Ms. Ben?
I was going to ask because privacy was brought up, right? So as someone who actually speaks English and Spanish, Spanish can be a lot longer than English sometimes. So one of the options you said is having it English and Spanish. What if we just had it in Spanish? Do you see that as a privacy issue
I
yourself?
don't. I may be missing something, but, if you have 50 ballots by the express vote machine and one of them is in Spanish, you
Mhm.
still have no idea who that one person
Correct.
is. There are 50 people that unless the person comes up and says, I voted express vote and I did it in Spanish,
At this time.
you aren't,
this time.
yes,
Mhm.
you aren't going to know.
Mhm.
So I don't think that is an issue.
Okay. I only ask because, again, the two languages may be extensive. And since this doesn't look like there's a lot of space unless the computer is going to allow us to. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Steve.
Any other comments?
No, Chairman, I actually have a question for Mr. Brown.
Sure.
See, do you see an issue with having it in dual language?
No, I do not.
And because my only concern is I do have a privacy concern. If, for example, you would not be able to identify the one voter unless it would have to be a circumstance where that was the only voter in the poll that used the express vote. And I think we had that issue with some of the people with disability. So I don't know if having it only in Spanish as opposed to both languages. Do you see an advantage one way or the other? And I
No.
guess that's what I'm looking for.
Well, to answer the specific scenario you raised, if only one person used the machine, it doesn't matter whether they voted in English and Spanish. If you know who they are, you're going
Yeah,
to know how they voted.
I guess. So, do you see one as having an advantage over the other?
I haven't thought it through, to be
Okay.
honest.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate your interest.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? If not, we thank you all for being here and your interest in this issue. Now, I think it's time for the board to discuss what action they might like to take with respect to this matter.
I, for one, think we should have a better. I want to look, when it comes from the Secretary of State's office, when he gets to hear how everything is verified. I'd like to see more verification of this is correct, that's correct, this process was done properly, that process was done. So I think it's more like accountability. So if it starts at the Secretary of State's office where these ballots are made up, and they come down to Board of Elections, that people at the Board of Elections, at the Secretary of State's office says that this is the correct information and it's going on the ballot. It gets down to the vendor writes the program is then verified that it is correct. It matches what was sent from the Secretary of State's office. Then the machines can be verified. The machines have to be verified. And actually, everybody's got to sign off on this. When it's written, when it comes down to you, Secretary of State's office signs off. When you write whatever program, you verify the program, you sign off on it. When the machine is tested, it gets signed off. When we go through our process, whatever our process is, we sign off on it. So that everywhere down the line, someone is responsible. And so that at the end of the day, everything is completely above board. Everybody knows that everybody else did. It can go out to the public. The public can be 100% sure that the process was done properly. They don't have any problem with our voting procedures. We can move forward, but I think that's in my
Thank you,
opinion.
Mr. West. Any other?
I think what Mr. West has said pretty well reflects what the existing statute is. If If I may, we have Rhode Island General Law 17-19-14A, dealing with preparation of voting equipment for election testing. Subsection A says, prior to any election at which an optical scan precinct count units are to be used, the Secretary of State shall prepare the layout and format of the computer ballot in connection with the voting equipment vendor under contract with the state. The second sentence reads, the Secretary of State shall be responsible for the coding and layout of all computer ballots to be used in each election under contract, including the printing of the ballots and the preparation of the device to ensure that the ballots are compatible with the device, and shall transfer all information relative to the ballot and its preparation to the state board. So Secretary of State is responsible for printing up all the ballots. Also, under this statute, is responsible for that machine as well, make sure it is programmed properly in whatever language that has to be deployed out into the field. So I think what Commissioner West has said on the coming up this election, that we instruct the Secretary of State's office to send representatives here to test those machines so that they comply with the requirements on the section 17, 19, 14, subsection A. And also, we should make sure that when the machines are deployed, that there is a sign or a message on each machine to instruct the voters, whatever language is necessary, to check their ballot against the machine to make sure it's properly, that he voted for the proper candidates. And if they have a question or a mistake, to see the warden at the voting station.
Any other
Thank you.
comments from the wood? Jen?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I agree completely with Commissioner West and DeSimone and Scholes that there needs to be more proofing of this. I just want to bring us, I think there is a potential that we will have to change the law to accommodate these new machines for checks and balances. And I say that I think we have to do something ahead of the general with what we have. I just want to center us in the fact that there's, this is a serious issue. We all know that. There has been a lot of blame and stuff flowing around in the press, and I think we're all interested in moving forward and assuring the voters that we are working together. The way that our agencies are set up, I understand there are parts of the process that are respective to one agency or the other, and that can be cause, I think, for confusion, and we're hearing that. I think, though, just centering us in the fact that it is all of our collective responsibility to ensure elections integrity and voter access. So I particularly would like to see us discuss in more detail moving forward Commissioner DeSimone's idea that there should be representatives from each of the three entities in front of the machines at one time for checks and balances. I know in my organization, if one department is creating something, I make sure other departments are seeing it, because you can get, after looking at things for some time, things can get lost. And especially with these new machines, I think we just have to be overly diligent in ensuring that everyone is working together to make sure that things are accurate.
Ms. Bettencourt?
And I just want to, I think, going back to the language question, I think to Steve Brown's point, we should address this before the November election. We have questions in several municipalities that are going to happen. And so we have to decide, do we want them in both languages? I'm happy to, that's fine. Again, this might be too long, but as long as the machine can take enough text in both languages, that's important, especially just the questions in Providence, the questions in other cities. That's going to be a really important thing that my mom, who's a Spanish-speaking person, may be able to read what she just voted about, and several other voters in Rhode Island.
Any further comments, Mr.?
No, I would have a motion for the board to,
If I may I make one comment before that? It's my own personal opinion about this. Although I have some feelings about responsibility, I don't think that is helpful in this particular case. I think it's clear that some errors were made. And my major concern is that between now and November, we don't have a lot of time for new legislation, but we do have an opportunity. And I would urge that the Board of Elections and the Secretary of State's office plan to get together and as a team and with Spanish-speaking ability involved in the process, go through the workings of this machine and make sure that the ballots correctly report the situation and that the machine works properly in order to facilitate the people who are using it, who in some cases may be disabled, can be assured that their ballot is being properly handled and properly cast. You have
Well, I have a couple of motions for the board to consider. The first being that, and I understand the primary is only a week away. But to the point of the Spanish versus the English ballot, my first motion would be that for the November election, and I would leave this to whatever can be accomplished in November, that ballot that comes out of that machine either be in Spanish for the Spanish voter or be in dual language. And I think that the board should order that. I don't think that should be something that should go by the wayside. So my motion is to have the ballot that the ES&S prints out for the voter, or the ballot that's going to be fed into the machine later on that comes out of the express vote machine be in Spanish for the November election. And I would accept that a report from our vendor that says that either the ballot will be in Spanish or it'll be in dual language for those communities. And I leave that up to the vendor, because the vendor can tell me what's easier for that. And I would ask that that be done in consultation with the Secretary of State, because I understand that the ballot is Secretary of State's purview, but the election is our purview.
Yes.
So that would be my first
Is
motion.
there a second to that motion?
I have a question.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Motion has been made and seconded.
I have a question to Bob, okay? Other than Spanish, what other foreign language voters do we address in our election?
There are none. It is only in those 4 communities where they get the dual ballots.
But what about the Hmong community, French,
They're not.
Portuguese communities?
They don't, none of the communities meet the requirement after the census that would require us to offer the multiple languages.
So this is the only 2 languages?
They're the only 2 in the state of Rhode Island.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions?
And again, for the members, if I could move to require it for the primary, I would, but I just don't see how we could accomplish that. So, but at least for the general election, I think that we need a report prior to the ballot being prepared that we're able to do this. And either way, I'm comfortable either way.
So I ask Commissioner Newsom about a question. Is this limited to the express voting machine?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
Again, because that, Commissioner, that's the only machine that actually creates a ballot. Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't want to expand to the regular printed ballot.
Right.
Okay. Everyone understands the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So ordered. Now, Mr. DeSalone, you
Well,
said.
I have a second motion that we, and again, through the staff here at the Board of Elections, that we establish 2 things, a protocol for ballot verification, particularly with regard to the express vote. And that should include a representative from the Secretary of State's office to review that ballot that goes into the express vote and how, whatever means it goes in. And then the second part of the protocol is, as far as the testing protocol for our office, that we review that as well in conjunction with the Secretary of State's representative, so that we know what's coming out of that machine. But I think there needs to be a written protocol so that everybody's aware of it and that the public's aware of it as well. I know there are protocols in place put in by the vendor, put in by our office, put in by the Secretary of State. I think they all need to be documented so that the public can see them and give the public some confidence that there's an actual written step-by-step protocol for this. Because Commissioner West's comments, I think were right on the money in this discussion.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll
Second.
second for discussion.
Made and seconded. Mr. West?
Monk, should we have the different entities sign off on it?
I think I think that's,
would like to have that in the motion.
I would amend the motion to include that as well.
You second the amendment? You second it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Further discussion?
Further to Mr. DeSimone, with respect to the protocol, you envision that this protocol would include the running of a test ballot and compare it against to the printed ballot that.
I mean, I think that's the way to handle it, Commissioner Scholes. Yeah, I think you're correct.
Any other
And-
discussion?
Just a question to clarify, we would want that done prior to the general for early voting start, so the machines
Oh,
will go.
absolutely.
Yes. okay.
Absolutely, because those machines are gonna
Yeah,
go
of
into
course.
effect
Yes.
before the general
That
election.
is correct.
Anyone else? Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion as amended indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So
And-
ordered.
And I would hope that for our next agenda, we could have something on the agenda as to, where we're going with that.
May I ask a question? So, because we mentioned a couple of times, several of us, changes in legislation. So, can we put that in, I don't know when we all take some of that on our agenda, but I do think that that's really important. Like
Yes.
legislation to change, how, the language of just creating ballots, of how our agencies are working together.
Customarily, that comes up at least by December.
By December, okay, thank you.
And that will be, I think.
Okay, moving along. Item 4, the board may discuss and vote to hear public comment and adopt the amended rules and regulations for mail ballot certification 410-RICR-20-00-23 with any approved public comments. Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just need a little more room to spread out. Can the board hear me? Present before the board is under number 4, the mail ballot certification regulation. And before you, you will see revisions that were addressed by the board, or at least seen by the board back when this matter was presented. And then you will also see some additional comments that are in italics. Those italicized additions follow the comments, suggestions by John Marion on behalf of Common Cause and the ACLU. So what I can do for the board is just briefly summarize what you have before you by way of the main revisions. You'll see on page 1 that there's the deletion of automated mail ballot signature verifier, and that's because that will not be used for this process. Under the last quarter of the page, under designated election official, there was some discussion at the last board meeting when this was, or at the board meeting when this was first considered, as to what the role of the board would be in this entire process. You'll see the italicized section is language that was proposed by Mr. Marion. So what it would accomplish is that before there is a rejection of a mail ballot envelope, the oath envelope, there would be at least one board member who would be participating in this process. And then if it became necessary in the view of that board member, it could be elevated up to the next level, which would be the entire board. On the second page, there were some modifications, including changing the number of days from 14 to 20. That's consistent with the statutory amendments. Mr. Marion noted that under the following section that begins with notice shall be given to the public, that it should note that it will be the websites of both the board and the Secretary of State as opposed to this junction that was used beforehand. On the following page, you'll see at the very top that there's a reference now to a scanned copy of the voter certification envelope. That's because the mail sorter makes a digital scan of the information contained on the outer envelope. Now, I would like to note at the bottom, you will see that under section B, all of section B 1 through 3 was originally deleted in the last version that you saw. I have reinserted the language other than the language dealing with 2 witnesses and the notary. And that's because when you look at the amendments to 17-2013, that language that I still have in here is consistent with the final version that was actually adopted by the General Assembly. At the suggestion of Mr. Marion, on the following page, you will see the reference to choose to vote by mail for any reason. Again, he's correct. That would follow the language of the amendments to Chapter 20 more closely. So that's one of the proposed amendments for this regulation. Below that, you'll see a reference to an underlining. The reason for the deficiency shall be identified in the voter's record within the CVRS. That's to make sure that there is a record of the deficiency that will always be there. And under that, you'll see that immediately after there was a discrepancy noted and a need for the voter to be aware of that, the designated election official must notify the voter of the deficiency, providing him notice either by mail or electronically, if that is available from the information we have on the voter. At the very bottom, you'll see that this is designed in a way so that the voter, if they so choose, can determine the status of their ballot using an electronic portal that would allow them to determine whether it was accepted or rejected. The following page deals with revisions that are consistent with the signature comparison process that is now required due to the amendments to Chapter 20 of Title 17. And just to highlight them, the focus, as you can see under 3A, would be on signature comparison. And that would be comparing what is on the oath envelope with what is contained in the CVRS. Under subsection C, you can see that there is no reference, it's been deleted, a reference to the box to be checked, indicating that the voter is incapable of signing. That has been removed. Under subsection D, originally, when you had a cure being done by the voter, they would be submitting a notarized affidavit in some cases, attesting that this is their signature. I thought, to be consistent with the fact that we no longer have a notary requirement for all other voters, it would be more appropriate just to have that voter attest under pains and penalties of perjury that it is their signature and that the information provided is truthful. Most of the balance of the changes that are before you deal with the deletions of the notary and the signature requirements primarily. So I don't think there's anything else other that would need to be addressed in the remainder of the regulation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Nunez as well could answer any questions.
Is it the board's preference to ask questions now or wait until we hear if members of the public have any questions as well? Are there members of the public here who would like to comment on these changes to this particular item? John?
Hi again, John Marion from Common Cause. I first just want to start out by noting Mr. Marcaccio gave me sole credit. Certainly, I'm the one who sent the email with the attachment, but Steve Brown deserves a lot of credit for the suggested changes as well. I tried to follow which of the changes you accepted, and I think you accepted virtually all the changes. I wasn't sure if you accepted the change about notifying voters by telephone in addition to mail in cases where there was a problem. But we just wanted to sort of maximize the ways that you would reach out to voters. But
What section was that, John?
so
I did see it. I just don't remember what section it was.
it was in my point number 6, which was 23.4 B3C. Which I think would be on the 4th page. And I don't have the updated version, obviously. It's sort of the bottom third of the 4th page of my version. But anyway, we're grateful you took most of our suggestions and solicited our input on this because they're important regulations.
Mr. Chair, if the board chooses, we could make the motion include the fact that when necessary, there would also be notification by telephone.
Thank you.
Chairman, can I just ask one other question? When I saw the telephone comment, Ray, I didn't know if it would be more feasible for our staff to notify via text message if we have a telephone. I'm assuming most of the telephones information that we receive are cell phones.
I'm wondering if perhaps it would depend on how we practice this, but it would be electronic notification if you did transmit it by text, but we could actually add that too.
Because then we'd also have a record of it, right? Because we would understand that. I know we have a record that we made a phone call, but a text message is actually something that we can kind of put our hands on. So I'd like to include that if we could.
I'll make
Obviously,
sure
I would support it. I don't think we need to like rehash it again. I think we could still vote on
I think it also keeps language updated, right? Just the example earlier, like we have to keep
If I could add some comments on that section. The reason why that's worded that way is because we've been working closely with the Secretary of State's office to introduce what's called the ballot track service. And that's a service that is that allows the voter to opt in to receive such notifications. They can receive a text message, they can opt in for an email, they can also opt in for a voice call, sort of like a robocall.
Sure.
It can be in English and it can be in Spanish, and they can control when they receive those alerts, such as they won't receive them in the middle of the night, for example. So that's sort of why we worded that way, so that if the voter opted in to receive those, they would receive a notification. For example, if their mail ballot was deemed to be deficient and needed to be corrected, they would receive a text message if they had opted in to receive that. They would also, by default, receive a U.S. a piece of US mail, that would take longer to get to them. So we thought the ballot tracks was something that was more efficient, and the person had actually opted in to receive it. As you know, the number of mail ballots that we've received is increased substantially, and we don't know how many deficient mail ballots we could get. We could get 100, we could get 1,000. Contacting people on an individual basis manually would be quite the task in a short amount of time. So that's why we were relying on the ballot track service for the voter to opt in to receive those, and if they did, they would get the notifications by either of those three methods.
Other comments?
Yeah, Ray, I think we can solve that by adding the words, the phrase right after notifications. That's paragraph C, including but not limited to notification by telephone or text messages.
That's great.
Oh, is that right? That's-
Well, I could hear you.
Yeah, I think we got you. Thanks, Dave. Any other comments? Thank you, Mr. Marion. As always, we appreciate your assistance in these matters. Any other comments from the public? If not, is there a motion with respect to this?
Make a motion, we accept changes to certification for 10-ICR-20-00-23 as amended.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Made and seconded. Comments?
Oh, I just didn't know if it should be added, the language that we changed, so as amended there with the addition of
Yeah, I think.
that,
I
okay,
think that was
sorry.
the intention.
Sorry,
I
I
did
missed
not.
it.
I think it's clear.
Yeah, sorry.
Everyone feels that way, I hope. Any other comments? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So ordered. Item 5. The board may discuss and vote to hear public comment and adopt the amended rules and regulation for tabulation of mail ballots 410-RICR-20-00-16 with any approved public comments. Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of these changes are consistent with the changes we just discussed with the certification regulation. And again, you'll see that the underlined part of the document is the version that you reviewed when you voted to send this out for public comment. And the italicized language is what I've included from the comments provided by Mr. Marion and Mr. Brown. So under 16.3 on the first page, you'll once again see that this addresses the question of the role of the board in the final determination process. Here dealing with having at least one member of the board involved to determine that there has been an undervote on a ballot. On the second page, again, extending the amount of time to 20 days prior to the election. And throughout the regulation, there's been a change amending the term that we use for the tabulation process from automated ballot counter to automated ballot tabulator. Then beginning on page 3 at the very bottom, you will see the process is laid out for the review of damaged ballots or those that are for whatever reason unable to be processed in the normal manner. And this would include a determination of voter intent, which is laid out over this page and the following page, and thereafter through the next 2 pages. This regulation would also include a form that would give some guidance as to determining voter intent. And I believe that that's been circulated. I don't have that in my copy here, but I believe it's been circulated as part of the package you received
It was,
today.
yeah.
And that will be attached to the regulation. I'd like to just note uh, on the second to last page, 16.7, when it goes through the process for determining voter intent. Again, this is all language that you've already had before you when you initially took the vote as to that process. And we did receive the comment from Mr. Brown and Mr. Marion at the bottom on H, making clear, originally it said if a voter votes both yes or no on a question, no vote may be counted or for that question. And we did modify that to be for and against, since not all communities would use yes or no. On the last page, the proposal that was suggested, again, is italicized, and it improves the language because it now makes clear how the ballots would be counted when you have more than one person who will be elected to that office. So it could be a school committee where the top 5 are selected. This would just make clear that in those instances, this regulation would likewise apply. Does the board have any questions, Avi?
First of all, any comments from the public with respect to this matter? Mr. Brown?
You don't want to give Mr. Marion credit anymore.
We're tag teaming here. I too also want to thank Mr. Marcaccio and the board for taking serious consideration of the comments we made. There's only one in this set of comments that was not mentioned, and I just wanted to raise it. And that has to do with section 16.5C, where we suggested changing the word any to every. And it's in the top of page 4. I don't know, is there, if the board or designated official is unable to determine voter intent for any contest or question on the ballot?
Under C?
C, yes. It's the last sentence of C. And I can explain our.
Did you say
thinking behind it.
16.5C?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's our B actually.
Oh.
No, yeah, sorry. With the.
Yeah. And that was to change it from any to every?
Yes.
That is in this version.
Okay,
So it is
that's-
italicized.
Yeah, that is actually what it
Yeah,
says.
I missed that when I was going through the summary for the board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. And again, our appreciation to you and Mr. Marion for your assistance in these matters. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I should note that when we do finalize these, some of the letters, numbers, those will, in some cases, change as we make sure that it's properly edited.
Thank you, Mr. Marcaccio. Any comments from the board? Is there a motion with respect to this matter?
I move we adopt the regulation as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? If not, the motion passes. Item, excuse me while I turn the page. The board may vote to certify the voting equipment that was publicly tested on August 15th, 2022, to be used in the statewide primary on September 13, 2022, in accordance with Rhode Island General Laws, Section 17-19-14. Mr. Opposer.
This afternoon, I present to you the results of the logic and accuracy tested, which was conducted by Election System and Software with oversight from the Board of Elections staff for the upcoming Tuesday, September 13th statewide primary. 520 DS200 voting tabulation machines were tested in total. Of the 520 voting machines, 437 will be used at the 395 precincts statewide. 83 of these machines are currently in use at the local board of canvassers or for early voting. 3 DS-850s. They're the high-speed tabulators that we use to tabulate mail ballots. Were also tested. The testing of the equipment began on Monday, August 15th at 8 a.m. and continued Monday through Friday, concluding on Monday, August 22nd. It took 6 business days to conduct the logic and accuracy testing. For each piece of equipment tested, the testers began the test by initializing the equipment using a checklist we provide and printing the zero tape, which depicts that upon initialization, the equipment had 0 votes cast, which is report A, which you have in your possession. The testers entered into each voting machine the ballots which were coded specifically for the precinct machine to verify that the voting equipment verifying each precinct tabulation machine tabulated the ballots correctly. 15,694 ballots were used to conduct the logic and accuracy testing of this equipment. The number of ballots used to test the voting equipment varied based on the individual races that were contained on the ballots. The test decks contained, on the average, 17 ballots per precinct. Upon initializing the voting equipment, the tester of the equipment compared the precinct number on the test deck of ballots with the precinct number on the voting machine. The tester also started the equipment and confirmed upon printing the initial tape from the voting equipment that the totals were set to 0. Upon completion of the equipment testing, the tester totaled the voting tabulator, then compared the results on the results tape printed from the equipment with the master test deck for that precinct. It was known as the key. After the completion of tests for each voting district, the final test of the equipment occurs when the modem that is contained within the equipment engages and the results are sent wirelessly to the Board of Elections network located within this building at 2000 Plainfield Pike, Cranston, Rhode Island. That is the report that you have that has a B on it. After the completion of the test and the numbers correspond with the DS-200 voting equipment, the equipment is reset to 0. A report is printed to display that the machine contains 0 election results. Report C in your possession. It is then locked and prepared for delivery to the designated polling place to be used on Election Day. Upon completion of the equipment testing, summary reports are produced for each community. All the individual summary reports produced were tabulated, and the total of the individual community reports are compared to the statewide summary report, which depicts a summary of the testing results statewide. 473 express votes, our new equipment that we discussed earlier this afternoon. The ballot creating devices, which are being used for our first time in the state, are being deployed. These machines are being used to replace the Automark, a ballot marking device, which has been in use in Rhode Island since 2006. And speaking for the staff, we are happy to see them going away. The express vote ballot created is entered into the DS-200 to confirm that the device will tabulate correctly. The express vote equipment was received in the BOE warehouse on July 19th of this year. The ballots created by the device are included in the batch of ballots that is used to test the designated precinct DS-200 voting tabulating machine. Before I go on, are there any questions from the board members regarding the testing report A, B, or C?
Any questions?
Very thorough.
Okay, in addition to the voting equipment, the Board of Elections is delivering this equipment to 365 locations around Rhode Island. We're delivering 2,822 voting booths, 798 supply boxes, 358 drop boxes, which was from a directive you issued a few weeks back, 1,535 poll pads, and 283,000 ballots. Of the 283,000 ballots, these include 176,000 Democratic ballots, 98,200 Republican ballots, and 8,800 nonpartisan ballots. Delivery of our equipment is being conducted by Hogan Movers headquartered in Cranston, Rhode Island. The delivery of the equipment began on Wednesday, August 31st, and will conclude on Monday, September 12th. Hogan Movers currently has 6 trucks on the road each business day within this time period. At this time, I am happy to answer any questions from the board. If there are no questions, I request that you certify the logic and accuracy test, which was performed by Election System and Software and the BOE staff statewide for the upcoming primary to be held on Tuesday, September 13th. Also, with your approval, I ask as part of your motion and vote that you allow us to use your digitized signatures to complete the official certification documentation.
Is there a motion to make the motion which Mr. Reposa requests?
I just have one question
Certainly.
first, if okay. Thank you, Chair. Bob, of the communities affected by the errors on the express votes, can we be assured that the express votes now being deployed to those communities are in fact accurate and rectified?
To the best of our ability, I will say yes. We
Okay.
know that they have been, and for those machines that are still here, because some of them have not left this building, the new USB sticks are going to be installed in them. The ones that are out in the field in one socket are going to be replaced, and the ones out there are going to be brought back.
I would just want to make sure that in the precincts, in the, the polling places, that there is a way for people to be able to check that before primary day.
And that is, they are being checked before they were delivered.
Okay,
Some have been delivered, some are still here.
okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Oh, you need I'm happy to give you my digital signature. I do have a question, though, about that, and it just went outside of my brain. Oh my God, sorry. I will take it back. My God, sorry, their signature.
Is there a motion to make the certification as requested by Mr. Reposa?
So I'll make that motion.
Moved by Mr. Scholl, seconded by Mr. West. Any comments? If not, if I may comment, I think we should all note the amount of work that is involved in making sure that the machinery and the equipment for elections are all in place in the appropriate time span, and security is protected. And I, for one, am most grateful for the efficiency and the hard work of the staff in making sure this happens. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So ordered.
Can I make a quick question comment just about that? Because earlier, Mr. Vitale mentioned having a sample paper ballot next to the express machine. Is that a possibility that we can do at all during primary? Again, I agree, and it's great that we're going to check, but just to be, I think we need to be safe.
Well, there is a section in state law that says that we will send sample ballots to all the polling places. And we have done so for the last 25 years that I have been employed by the Board of Elections. So yes, every express vote, there will be a sample ballot
Thank you.
sent to that
Thank you.
location.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your concern, Ms. Betancourt. Okay, item 6 on the agenda, excuse me, item 7 on the agenda. The board may hear and vote upon an appeal filed on behalf of Edward T. Cardillo Jr. from a decision rendered by the Town of Johnston Board of Canvassers on August 9, 2022, denying a challenge to the residency and voter registration of Dennis D. Cardillo Jr. Mr. McCarthy?
If the parties would like to come up to the table. And would council please identify themselves?
I'm John J. Bevilacqua, representing Edward Cardillo, the appellant.
I'm William Conley, I am legal counsel to the Town of Johnston Board of Canvassers.
And I believe the parties who are actually involved in the residency dispute are also here. If they could just identify themselves.
Edward Cardillo Jr.
Dennis Cardillo Jr., and I just wanted to make sure.
Can you turn on your mic? I'm so sorry. Thank you. Nope.
I think you have to double press it.
Push the green light.
No, the green light.
The green.
There
you go.
You got it.
Did you hear me okay? I didn't do that. Thank you.
I'm Dennis Cardillo Jr. I just also wanted to make sure Mr. Raposa did receive my email with 29 pages of proof of residency that I sent in earlier this afternoon. Yes, I also sent one last week as well. Yes.
Well, I have not seen that, nor has the board. I just want to note that, so the board is aware that apparently there is other information that has been submitted. So with that in mind, I'll at least frame the issue for the board, and then you can decide what you think is appropriate, given what Mr. Cardillo just stated on the record. Just to bring us back by way of summary, this matter was the subject of an initial appeal brought by Edward Cardillo Jr. regarding the voter registration of Dennis Cardillo Jr. The matter was heard by the Board of Elections on an appeal on August 24 regarding the decision rendered by the local Board of Canvassers on or about August 9. At that time, the board remanded the matter to the Town of Johnston and asked that they make a record in support of their decision, including findings of fact. On August 30, the local board reconvened for that purpose. I have reviewed the transcript, which I have emailed to each of the board members, and I can summarize at least generally what is in that. The local board reconvened, and Solicitor William Conley presented a summary of the evidence that was introduced by the challenger in that matter. Mr. Conley identified and summarized the affidavit as well as the investigatory reports regarding Mr. Dennis Cardillo's residency. The report summarized the investigators' surveillance of Mr. Cardillo at an apartment complex located in the city of Cranston, known as Chateau Chatillon. After receiving the summary of the evidence from Attorney Conley, one of the board members asked a question of Mr. Dennis Cardillo as to whether the vehicle in the photographs was owned by him. Mr. Cardillo stated that it was owned by his father. The question before the local board was whether or not the evidence, including the challenger's affidavit and related documentation, was sufficient to, quote, create a reasonable cause to suspect that the challenged voter is not in fact eligible, end of quote, to vote. And that's under Rhode Island General Laws, Section 17, Chapter 9.1, Section 28. Now, reasonable suspicion standard is the lowest evidentiary standard that is to be met. And its purpose is to basically initiate further investigation once the local board determines that there is reason to suspect that the person does not reside at that address. From my review of the record, the local board then proceeded to take a vote, indicating that the evidence presented was insufficient to meet that standard. And I believe that the vote was unanimous. Now, as to the exact issues that are going to be addressed here, I have not received any papers from Mr. Conley, which I think is understandable, given that we've had this appeal filed on, I think, August 31. And I think we would at least want to allow the town to address what it believes to be the merits of its decision that it reached on August 30. And then, of course, we could hear from Mr. Bevilacqua. Unless the board has other comments at this point.
Oh, I just have a question, Ray. So here before us is going to be evidence regarding reasonable suspicion?
Not at this point, no, Mr. DeSimone. The only thing before you is whether or not the local board reached its decision appropriately. So Mr. Bevilacqua needs to set forth in his appeal those errors of either law or fact.
So if we find that the local board acted inappropriately, what is our recourse at that point?
Well, under our regulations, you have two avenues. The first, which is the predominant way that it would proceed, which is to once again remand the matter back to the local board for further instruction. The other is to hear the matter de novo, if you thought that was necessary in order to resolve the matter, or if time was of the essence.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So at this time, it would be appropriate to hear from Mr. Conley?
I believe so, because we have not heard, we have not received any position, but perhaps I think I should be corrected on that, because the appeal was filed by Mr. Bevilacqua. Maybe we should hear from him first, and then allow Mr. Conley to present his position on behalf of the town.
On advice of counsel, we would proceed in that manner then, Mr. Bevilacqua.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission.
Can you be sure your mic is on?
Yeah, it's on. Just bring it closer to you.
I'll
please.
bring it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I never had difficulty when I was in
No.
the Senate.
He should not.
People always heard what I had to say. This matter came before this board on appeal originally, and this board directed the Board of Canvassers to conduct a hearing to determine whether or not reasonable cause created a suspicious belief. And I say that because it's not much of a standard at all. If you see photographs, and if you read the transcript, you will see that in that transcript, the chairman of the board said, photographs speak for themselves. Maybe we should have a hearing, or words to that effect. I'm not reading it per se. But the fact of the matter is, this board directed them to perform a certain function. What we contend is they did the same thing that they did at the first hearing, did not consider the evidence. But one thing that they did do, which I think demonstrates that they wanted a hearing because they had questions. From review of the transcript and the affidavits and the inspector's report, demonstrated that there were serious questions. And that particular Baptista, that is a member of the board, wanted to know who owned the car. There was no evidentiary hearing at that time. An evidentiary hearing is question and answering. There was objections made because that's exactly what she started, the hearing, and then moved right after that to deny it. Not reviewing the evidence and saying because of X, because of Y, that's contained in this affidavit, not in his affidavit that one of the members of the board possessed at the time of this hearing. This doesn't ring as being fair. This doesn't ring as giving Mr. Cardillo and following the general laws that requires you to read the affidavit and be objective. Review it, consider it, and if you didn't like what you saw, say so. None of them did that, other than the chairman who said, well, the photographs speak for themselves. Should we have a hearing? He was ignored, a motion was made, and immediately voted it down. Now, in my understanding of what the law is and the standard for which that body was to consider the affidavit and the private investigative report, as a matter of fact, I've never been to a board of canvassers when the solicitor not only gave them the standard, explained it to them, made it in simple language, but went over every single part of the affidavit and the investigator's report, went over every word, and it was ignored. That's error. You're supposed to give your reasons. I listened to this board and the questions that come about, and you have reasons for those questions. You make inquiry. You ask the individuals who can give you the answer. And if they don't, you make up your own decision. But the fact of the matter is, they wanted to ask questions, but apparently they had a predisposed mind on how they wanted this to end. All we're asking for is to be treated fairly.
Thank you, Mr. Bevilacqua.
Thank you.
May I speak just briefly?
I would advise not at this point, Mr. Chair.
No. I believe Mr. Conley should speak.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. Again, William Conley, legal counsel to the Town of Johnston Board of Canvassers. I would agree with the summary that you received from your legal counsel by way of introduction to this hearing. He correctly cited the law that the Board of Canvassers was following at the date of this hearing. His description of the legal standard is consistent with the description of the legal standard and explanation of the legal standard that, in fact, I gave to the board on that day. Perhaps the only slight difference that I would suggest to you from the summary that you just received to the hearing itself is that I did not merely summarize the evidence that was presented to the board. The remand of the board was for the exact reasons that Mr. Mercatio explained to you, and to make sure that the record was clear, that the affidavit and all evidence in support of it became a part of the record. I actually read into the record every piece of evidence verbatim that was contained in the affidavits and in the supplemental reports that were provided. There was, in fact, a time when the chair did turn to me and say that the photographs speak for themselves, and that was in response to my not only identifying the photograph by page, but for the purposes of making sure the written transcript was complete, I was actually describing what was contained in the photographs for that purpose. Now, the reason I did that was so that the board could be assured that all evidence presented to the board was a part of the record and was considered by the board in making its findings. And at the conclusion of that, I did explain to the board after that presentation that they had the opportunity to discuss it among themselves, ask questions among themselves, conduct whatever inquiry and discussion they thought appropriate. And I stepped out of the way and let the fact finders and the board do their job. And what they did was to make a motion to find that the standard under the statute was not met. That's my explanation.
Are there questions of either of the attorneys?
One question, Mr. Connolly.
Yes, sir.
Was the affidavit and photographs into evidence as an exhibit?
Yes, they were. So the affidavit and all the reports with it were entered into the record as a full exhibit. That's part of the transcript. And if I may, one of the questions that was asked the last time I was here, and I couldn't answer it, was whether or not the board members were provided with the affidavit and the reports in advance of the hearing. And as a consequence of that question, I instructed the clerk to make sure that it was done that way and confirmed on an individual basis with each member of the board that that in fact happened.
The other question, was there any evidence presented by Dennis Cardillo?
No, there was not. It was, and by way of explanation, I can tell you that based on 17-9.1-28, I instructed the board that this was the preliminary process in the statute in which this very minimal evidentiary finding needed to be made. And if that happened, if they found that the standard was met, it would then go on to the evidentiary hearing in which the statute is very explicit on the mailings that have to be done, the questions that have to be asked, and the inquiry the board must conduct.
Mr. Chair, just, Ray, from our standpoint, the affidavit and the documents that were presented to the local board, they were entered into evidence.
They were Exhibit A, that's
So-
correct.
So, I mean, my inclination, looking at those affidavits, given the fact that the standard is so low, is that there certainly was a reasonable suspicion. Now, that doesn't provide any detriment to Dennis Cardillo to defend the matter. But certainly, I think there was enough evidence so that at least a hearing should have been conducted. Now, I understand how difficult these hearings are. But certainly it should have been a hearing conducted. I don't know how we could find otherwise. So do you have any suggestion as to how we should proceed or what considerations we should give that at this point? I mean, I'd hate to remand it back and then have them do the same thing again.
Mr. Chairman, I just do also want to mention that I'm not a recent resident. I have owned another house in the town of Johnston since the age of 24. For nearly 10 years, I have proof.
I would tell him not to make any statements on the record.
First of all,
at this
you're
point.
not under oath. There may come a time when you will be under oath, but we're not taking testimony right now. This is just presentation by counsel.
Yeah, and for your own benefit, I would tell you not to offer any evidence at this point. I mean, I can't represent you. Counsel at the table cannot represent you either because they have other parties to represent. So I would tell you at this point, don't say anything.
Any other questions with respect to this matter? The issue before us, based on what we have heard, is whether or not how we should deal with the appeal of Edward T. Cardillo Jr. with respect to the decision made by the Board of Canvassers, Johnson Board of Canvassers on August 9.
And thereafter, on August 30.
Thereafter.
So I guess, Ray, my inclination would be to move the board to find that reasonable suspicion did in fact exist, that they were incorrect, and that both Mr. Cardillos deserve a hearing on the matter. But
Basically to say then, because as you know, on an appeal, there are two aspects. There's the review of the facts, and then there's a review of the law. When you review the facts, which you may not be doing ever in this case, but if you were, there is great deference provided to the trier of fact. So For example, if Exhibit A includes the evidence and the board relied upon it and still found the way that it did, the underlying facts themselves really are not disturbed unless there is evidence that the trier of fact overlooked material evidence or otherwise was clearly wrong. Now, what Mr. DeSimone is speaking about is a legal standard, the legal aspect of the appeal, and no deference is provided. The appellate body, in this case, the Board of Elections, can review legal questions de novo because that is your prerogative. And the question would be whether, as a matter of law, the burden of proof in this case, which is a suspicion of a violation, as a matter of law has been met and therefore should be remanded for the purpose that Mr. DeSimone said. And I can understand why Mr. DeSimone said what he said, which is basically that when you apply that low standard to the facts without disturbing those facts, as a matter of law, you would find that the burden has been met and that the statutory investigation is triggered and that you proceed to the next step. And that will be an order by this board to the local board, if you so choose.
What's your pleasure?
I mean, my motion would be to order the board to conduct a hearing because the standard is so low. And I think, look, Solicitor Conley could not have done a better job in presenting what the standard should be for the board. And nor I think could Mr. Bevilacqua have done anything more but to present the evidence that they had. It's not a determination against Dennis Cardillo, but certainly there was enough, at least in my opinion, from a legal standpoint of reasonable suspicion. I mean, reasonable suspicion could have been simply an affidavit by someone saying he doesn't live where he said. And the board has to give someone a hearing. It just seems to me that the local board chose not to give them a hearing. So I would make a determination at this point. I would move as a matter of law that reasonable suspicion existed before the local board and that they have to conduct a hearing. Unless the board wants to conduct one de novo and skip the local board. But my motion would be to remand it based upon the fact that reasonable suspicion existed. Given the evidence in the record. I mean, that evidence is in as exhibits. And also it was in based upon Solicitor Conley's description in the transcript, which I think was very detailed. And I don't think he could have explained it any better, quite frankly.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'd like to expand upon what Commissioner DeSimone said about it, because if it's hearing at a local level, then the parties can bring in all their witnesses.
Right.
They bring in the exhibits and have a full-blown hearing.
Exactly.
With cross-examination, whatever. Right now, we only have two parties over here and not the witnesses. So we're sort of hamstrung to come up with a proper determination to give everyone their due process and do a fair hearing. So I think I'm going to support the remand back to the board, have the board conduct the hearing, give everybody notice, bring in all the witnesses, testify, present the record.
So that's a second to the motion then.
Yes.
Second to, okay. Is there a discussion with respect to this matter?
No.
Okay. Do we understand the motion? You want to repeat it, make sure everybody understands it?
Well, again, I would move that reasonable suspicion exists under 17-9.128, and that based upon that, the local board has to conduct a hearing and give all the parties their day, basically, before the board. I would remand it again without that caveat, but I'm just afraid that it'll come back before us again. So part of the motion is that reasonable suspicion exists to conduct a hearing and that the local board needs to conduct one. And I think it should be in the form of an order from this board.
And I think that hearing, the local board has to present findings of fact.
I would agree with that 100%, Commissioner Schultz.
Any further discussion with respect to the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So ordered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you.
Item 8, the board may vote to meet in executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws, Section 42-46-5A2, to discuss a matter pertaining to litigation captioned Board of Elections against Daniel J. Grzinch, PC 12-1173.
So moved.
Moved. Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, move into executive session.
I have to leave.
Okay, huh?
Fire district. So I'm not gonna be here for executive session.
You gotta.
I'm not gonna be here.
What happened?
Like, we don't, I can't. All right.
Election excused.
Yeah. Yes, it, I mean, it didn't, it's, they're in the primary against each
Yeah, I
other.
know.
Yeah.
I know. And it's good, it might be moved.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll see you
depends.
later. I have to, I have to go to a paying gig now.
What's his name? Edward still has it.
Yeah, he could, yeah, present it.
Yeah.
The-
Oh, no, I don't
yeah.
care about that. I'll tell them exactly what I think. They don't wanna know what I think, though. Believe me. I'll see you later. Take care.
Hey, we're getting there.
Ah.
I will be right with you.
Okay, I understand, Bill.
You might want to write on the table, so those are above. Just try to keep it within the box.
That's what you'll find in my voter record too.
Yes, very good.
Try keeping it consistent now that I'm here.
Read your signature.
I never want anyone to be like, is that person listening on the phone? No, I don't. My mother would say I don't. But it's an M, and it's
Well, that's, yeah, because it was like their motions. We're gonna make a phone call, involve in certain office, but.
And then people offer.
Is there another way to escape from the boardroom?
No, it's not. There's a back.
I mean, that would be wild. We went to the back and we'll go again.
Actually. It's huge. It's huge, actually. It's like right over the last part.
Is that the night of the last one?
No.
One of them has like a scooter or a skateboard and one.
Yeah,
I want to take the scooter.
That's okay. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I know. Bet. We're trying to figure out how to switch it on, trying to figure out if it's some little diagrams or maybe it's really like a two-month project. It's very different. I guess that grant money is not as much as other grants out there, so that's how you go up to. They've done this diagram for the last two, from 18 to now, they got just the kind of, they got just the kind of, they needed to pack those 5 boxes of different answers. So I was kind of thinking about it, but I know they were. I have a number I sent out to you guys for 37, 38, our relocation. And that was exactly, those are the ones we want to try to focus on, create a new diagram. So, there, I'm looking on, they gave me, all the one cash, because they each have the same document, they'll share it with you guys. So they don't have that updated document that we should have. So that would work. I guess I have a generic kind of diagram that I created. That's what I'll just send that out. So any locations that you can't get them diagram. Most of them, fortunately, most of them are out there, right? Those are most of them are those, maybe those days, those. Some locations, some instances, they have, kind of set of guidelines, which you can look at. On a populated floor, on floor, and like, step by step. Yes. We always do anyway, we always go over that particular training. So we have, probably, some of them we would have to do. It's good technicians. It's a lot. For example, just a brand new experience, doesn't have any election experience. And so, we're figuring out, like, we're on a training class. We're everything.
whole thing with the switch up, because I wanted something that's going to be easier, more efficient, to make the time race. What I was seeing, what I was getting, it's just as much as the world. So, I we do the inspection, we do try to do video, it's like, video, also do a hand sketch, actually, check this. You've been out there many times. A lot of this is in the film background, but it's not like you just go there for a lot of precinct numbers that every precinct number, the national, and then it's going to have this say how much you want to so put it kind of on each side, sketch up that. You won't have to put much necessarily like she would check out. They're gonna try to do something for it. Now they actually Yes, what I did is I created another folder that they all listed, and they also have any videos from saved in color.
That's Braille on it?
Oh, I didn't see that.
I actually voted on this. And I had votes. No, I did not use the Braille, but I did, in And I did not use the Spanish. Well, I don't. Yeah, Cody writes that. Yeah, I think I think like Wasabi started to, I know what it really was. No, but you can stick it in the machine and put it back to you.
Oh.
But the machines are okay. Yeah. Yeah. But they'll be based the issue on the changes. What's the rail balance? Yeah, you know, way to know. But there isn't rail.
Well, I get this.
I'm surprised.
That's weird to keep, yeah.
But I guess we just want to eliminate it. But it was funny because. So, you know, and so it was. Yeah. Oh, no, on CD.
Oh, so you,
So it's something bad. Yeah, like can't handle the E at the end.
oh.
Yeah, it was like. Yeah. But it was just funny, like, it was really, like, it could get the key. Had some guy that go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
But like, wow. Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, it's just. Yeah, I think it was good. Yeah. See pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of the different variations. So, yeah, so I have a blind voter who's volunteer of mine. And she's like, right, very so Los Angeles has 12 languages, something like that. They actually developed. So LA County is the biggest voting jurisdiction in the United States. They built their own machine. They were like, there are no machines on the market like, they're big old our own. And it's mostly because of the language. Language is tricky. You can imagine like Southern languages. There are a whole host of issues with languages that aren't. I don't even know what they call that. Roman alphabet.
Right, oh.
So, yeah, because some languages you don't read from left to right.
Right.
So it's just, I think they're
ballots in New York. Yeah, it's a complex problem. But they have 4 million voters. Yeah. So there's a new, the Help America Vote Act passed 20 years ago. And that pumped about $3 billion out. And it was in response to Bush versus Gore. And so we get rid of page ads. And so all the manufacturers came out with voting systems. And then they all consolidated. So it went from like all these little mom and pop businesses to like 3 big companies, including us. And so a lot of them came out with paperless systems at that point.
Right.
And then 2004 happened, and the issues in Ohio were paperless. So then states started to require paper with the Total Election Assistance Commission. They came up with federal voting standards. They didn't update their standard for like 17 years. So a couple of years ago, they updated the standards again. So there'll be a new generation of machines after 2024. So hopefully, we'll get rid of these after 2024, and there'll be something better. They'll come out and yeah. This is like the Chevrolet, and this is the General Motors of voting. The 2 biggest manufacturers are Newman. No, we have this machine. This company or the company it belongs to. So we use something called Eco Optech. And that got bought by ESNS.
And who was making the bottom
That was a one-off company for 10 years. Yeah. Yeah, nobody voted.
Nobody told me. Actually, I know someone who did that voted in it, and it's first vote. And I don't think everyone was watching them because it was in City Hall, in that office, it was so teeny tiny. And just felt pressure to vote a certain way. Not that anyone was actually pressuring this person to vote a certain way, but they felt this one was always in staff. And here's the machine. And it's like, everyone's voting yes.
Yeah, it's the only thing on the ballot.
Which is, yeah, so that I think is was awkward. And so did they move the location, and that's it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I got a mailer from Greg Maury saying, you vote at your city town hall. I'm like, what is it very safe?
And now it's like, I consider myself getting barely plugged in, and it really took me, I had no idea they were they, I mean, announced it, like, they didn't even know. Next thing you tell me, you're like, hey, what makes the public board member of the meeting? No announcement of it, it's always been a city hall, and it just didn't even occur to me to find out that they moved it,
Cranston moved there.
yeah. And I don't know, I mean, I didn't get a press release from Cranston, but I don't know if they like told Cranston Herald or something.
Yeah, I think he was here.
Yeah. Not nothing problems at all. And I think it's on the website, right, so it is now. It might have just updated the website, or just day that early voting started, but they're going. You know, Massachusetts, there's a lot of going to, boards. So it's very. But it looked like, I went over to the whole thing for Westminster, it actually looked great, it was a huge room, plenty of privacy. So it looks good over there. Other than the fact that, of course, I was his name was on the machine. Wait till they see that movie though. I knew it was gonna be I know, I can see that.
Wait.
I knew it was gonna be a Morgan thing, that was the one. Even though they hadn't said it outright, but I can feel it. Who else is in it? Wouldn't McKee showed up for LG,
Yeah, it would have been McKee versus Greenberg.
but McKee is on the ballot, governor, so you might not realize that. In terms of like, really no names. Yeah, and the Republican, I'm sure no one voted for Republican. direct ones.
Yeah, because there weren't any choices.
Well, there were,
He said it was.
they were uncontested, but they were still on the screen.
Yeah, but it wasn't. Yeah,
And whether or not, there's just so many Republican primary voters in Providence and falls.
He quickly pressed
I like it. I like it. But John, if you're gonna be a groupie, we need to start bringing snacks.
Yeah.
Because
I threw the whole bar at the last meeting. To replenish.
I had like a cheese stick, I had to do a bit of running out of the 3-hour meeting. That's enough.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Well, so we're.
Long day.
Long days. You know?
Hey, Ray, we got a quorum present. Can we do this?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay. It is 4:38, and this, it would be appropriate to have a motion to reconvene. I would like to reconvene this meeting of the Board of Elections, and I would like a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session.
So move.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Finally.